Welcome back to the show.
Welcome back to the show.
And now, your hosts of the Card Subject to Change podcast, the For Frequency's Sake Tag Team Champions of the World, the Wizard CZ, and Never Wrong Nick Bull.
Hello, one and all, and welcome to another exciting edition of the Card Subject to Change podcast, the podcast by the fan, for the fan. Of course, I'm your host, Never Wrong Nick Bull. We're so happy to have you along. You want to thank those for who make it fortunate or possible for us to come along, and that's Lopez Pizza. We're built by Durham Remodeling, colored by Ryan Allison Tattoo, and protected by Jared Zook of Country Financial. We're in the throes of winter. We hope you're keeping warm out there. So happy you've joined us. Episode 166. We'll get to that in just a few moments. Like I said, I'm your host, Never Wrong Nick Bull. Joining me, I'd be remiss if I did not mention him. He is one half of the For Frequency's Sake Tag Team Champions. He is my tag team partner. He is the one. He is the only. He is the Wizard, CZ. Wiz, how you doing, bud?
Man, I'm feeling real good, Nick. How about yourself?
Feeling good. A little chilly tonight. We're going to get through this. I'm looking forward to this show. Looking forward to our guest here tonight. First-time guest. So we get
Love
excited.
a first-time guest, and we're gonna ask all the hard questions, put him on the spot with everything we do.
Yeah.
But we are bringing in a Midwest veteran. Has been in the business for, I believe, about 18 years, almost 20. Known in Impact Pro Wrestling. He's been in APW. You see him across the Midwest. Please welcome in Justin Decent. Justin, how are you today, sir?
Man, I am fantastic. How are you guys doing today?
Feeling good, feeling good.
Doing great. Glad to have you here. We love having first-timers here in the studio. And we kick off all the first-time interviews with the same question I asked everybody else. Why professional wrestling? What was it that pulled you in and kept you here?
Man, what doesn't? I mean, it's a captivating spectacle of good versus evil, climactic battles in vibrant clothing with characters that are bigger than life. I mean, I was hooked in the 80s when over the top, larger than life was the only way to get it. Ultimately, I think the thing that truly drew me in is this was something I wanted to do more than something I wanted to watch. And this is a story many people have heard probably. I like to share this. So when I was about 10 years old, my father owned a country kitchen restaurant.
Okay.
It was on I-80 in Grinnell, Iowa. And random night of the week, it's probably 9, 10, 11 o'clock. We're getting ready to close. As usual, when you're the owner's kid, you're there late, you're cleaning up tables. All of a sudden, 4 guys come walking in. And I start to have a panic attack. My dad looks at me and goes, "The hell? What the hell's wrong with you?" And I start, "Oh my God. Oh my God. It's Rowdy Roddy Piper. It's the Junkyard Dog. It's Hercules. It's Paul Roma." Like, literally, men that I had watched on television come walking into Dad's restaurant when I'm just thinking to myself, I'm ready to get the hell out of here and go to sleep so I can go to school in the morning. And heroes come walking in the door. And it's near closing time, and they ask, "Hey, man, we know it's late. We're on our way down the road to the next show. We see you got a buffet. You don't need to stock it. You don't need to keep the grill open. You can keep shutting down around us. If you can just let us have some of that and jet, we will pay you double what the cost is." My dad, not knowing who these guys are, but seeing my reaction, goes, "I tell you what, you sign a placemat for my son, I'll keep the kitchen open. We'll make everything fresh. We'll restock this thing all night." Piper looks at Dad and goes, I'll do you one better. How about he joins us for dinner?
Ooh.
So I got to sit there for about an hour, hour and a half as they ate dinner and just enjoy the company of my heroes, men who are legends. And in that moment, I realized not only is it the fun spectacle, but there's like this connection you can make with people that is absolutely magical. And I fell in love.
Well, we're not as impressive as four superstars walking into a country kitchen, Justin. But we love making that connection here with our guests. I know you probably have a ton of stories from sitting there with those four guys that night eating dinner. What are a couple that stick out to you? Like, those guys are everybody knows who those guys are. We're sitting at a dinner table with Ravishing McCrude.
All I'm doing is I'm having this all night long and just, do you remember when you wrestled this guy? That was so cool. Do you remember when you did this? Oh my God, that was so great. Like, I was too young and dumb to understand the value of what I could have had if I could go back and slap myself and go, shut this and open this. But no, 1,000% fanboy mode, and I don't think anybody but me got in a word.
Do you still have the signed placemat?
I believe my dad has it somewhere in his house.
Okay, that's cool.
Okay.
That's cool.
We both moved a lot recently, so I'm still looking for a few items.
I bet. Oh, that's a great story. Now, how long did it take you to come down from that high of having dinner and hanging out with those guys for over an hour?
I don't know that I ever did.
Great answer.
Let's be honest though, it was forever. And at that time in my life, I didn't have wrestling friends yet. That didn't happen till later in life. So the friends I went to couldn't give a flying fart in space about what I had to brag about or who I was talking about. My wrestling enjoyment was with my Uncle Tom, who was in the Army, so he wasn't even always around, and my grandfather that I saw every other weekend, roughly. My dad didn't like it. My mom didn't really watch it. So it was only in those moments that I really got to share my enjoyment with other people. Everybody else just kind of rolled their eyes and went, cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's
I know exactly what you mean.
and that's the thing about wrestling is Nick likes to say everybody's a wrestling fan. Nobody wants to admit it.
Absolutely.
Man, that is a fantastic entry into the world of wrestling. Let me ask you, you mentioned four legends. Who was there a particular star that you said, okay, this guy's so cool, I want to be like this guy?
Yes, but I never, ever really went that direction. Macho Man, that was my guy entirely. Infatuated with. 90% of the memorabilia I own, Macho Man, 1,000%. In fact, it was obnoxious for probably the first 10 years I wrestled. It was a given that once the bell rang and my match was over, this came to an end, and I just became Macho Man the rest of the evening until I woke up the next morning with a voice like this. All night long at the bar, it was, oh yeah, all night, yeah, baby. And I just could not stop.
I mean, it's a pretty good imitation. It's a pretty good imitation. I see why you did it.
Now, I do have to attribute, a buddy of mine loves to point out that from a physical standpoint, anybody who's ever truly seen me tromp around the ring, physically, I do embody a lot of Jim Duggan, I think, with I'll admit it, I'm very over the top, big flailing arms and legs. That's just how I approach life. Get out of my way.
So talk about you talked about how what made you want to do this great sport, this great business that we love. How did you get in? What was it like breaking into the business?
I had a roundabout journey. So I grew up. So a couple years after that amazing experience, my family moved. My dad remarried. We moved to a new town, and I met my friend that got me into pro wrestling. So we became friends at the 6th grade, and he had 2 older brothers. They were the Verwers brothers. Eventually, they became Big Dog Barber, Chance Cordova, and Vin Cross. They wrestled indies before I did. So old men, every one of them, terribly old. Josh's older brother, I believe, was our senior year of high school. And we were tape traders from back in the day. We traded Japanese tapes, Mexican tapes. We watched everything on TV. We recorded Raw, and then we watched. It was a heyday of wrestling. I mean, it was a smorgasbord. So that's all we did. We lived, breathed wrestling, and these guys, the older brothers, somehow found TS Aggressor. And this is in the days before really the internet. So we're talking 99. Yes, the internet's there, but nobody's promoting their school, their pro wrestling school, on the internet. So his older brother, Dustin, Big Dog Barber, gets in touch with TS Aggressor, who's starting a school and is one of his early students. And then we all just followed suit. The deal was, my friend Josh and I, because we've been friends since we were 12, we're going to go in together. Same time, same class. I had my money together. I was ready to go. I had been in the National Guard, so I used my basic training money. I was like, I'm gonna do this right now. I'm 19 years old. I'm plugged in. I've already got guys who are going to hook me up. I'm ready. He had no money. I'm like, oh, hey man, you got to wait. They're my brothers. This is my dream too. I'm like, all right, cool. I'll be the cool friend. So I waited. And then some of my other devilish natures came to the surface. I got like 13 speeding tickets in 3 months.
Whoa.
A few other indiscretions. And next thing you know, a significant portion of my funds are diverted from pro wrestling school to the state of Iowa. And my buddy finally gets this opportunity from his brothers. Well, they make him a deal. At this point, one's wrestling, the other one's a ref looking to wrestle. And they make him a deal and say, we will fund your training. We get to pick your gimmick. He's like, okay, cool. He tells me, I'm like, man, you have to wait. I don't have the money now. Give me just a little bit of time. Nah, man, I'm going. Yep. So he began his journey with his brother's funding and their chosen gimmick of Giggles the Clown.
Oh,
and
my.
A pair of blue overalls speckled in paint and either a horrible paint face or a lucha mask of a clown for probably the first year or so that he wrestled. So that would have been early 2000s. I got so caught up in life. I went and played Army. I went and took a government-funded trip overseas. So it ended up being 2007 before I finally found my way back. In between, when I was in town, I would go to shows. I would help take tickets. I would record matches. I would do security. I would sell nachos. Anything I could do to be a part of the show. I set up and tore down the ring more times before I ever got to wrestle than most people do in their lifetime. And I loved every bit of it. So when I came back from my deployment, I already knew everybody. I already knew TS. I already knew everybody on the card. I already knew all the guys. So I walked right up to him and I said, okay, when is your next training class? 6 weeks. Wrote him a check on the spot. He goes, oh, hold on to that. Wait till class starts. No. You will take this now. You will take this now, or I will never have this money again. I know me.
I know my tendencies.
January 2007, I started training.
And talk about that training. You've been through, you said you're in the National Guard, you were overseas, deployed. What was it like when you got into training finally after all these years of intending to go to wrestling school but had just been putting it off?
It was like a dream come true. Like, I got to do everything I've ever wanted to do. I was, at the time, probably the best shape I'd ever been in. And so I went through the training great, and I shouldn't have, because every night before training, my strict regimen was a case and a half of Bud Light and at least half a bottle of Jägermeister.
Oh, man.
And I know those guys absolutely hated me because we had to, every time we tied up, it had to be terrible. It had to be. But it was fantastic. TS Aggressor is a phenomenal man, phenomenal trainer. Johnny Fitness would be there quite frequently to pitch in. Mr. Destiny, who would also train at Harley Races School a bit, I believe, off and on. Just huge guys who kind of had a touch of that old school mindset. Like, I still remember tackle drop downs until you can't, arm drags until you can't, drills, and just, but every moment of it was fantastic. Every moment of it, I was switched on and 1,000% in, because I truly believe that the best thing for you to do in chasing your dream is have a touch of adversity and a little bit of a setback, because once you get there, you can truly appreciate it. So there wasn't a moment where I'm like, God, this kind of sucks, or, oh, I'm blown up, or it was, man, this is the freaking greatest thing I've experienced in my life, every minute of it. And I had great people with me. We had a great training class. A lot of guys who were still really great friends. My best friend in the world, I met. We had actually grown up in the same town. He had trained a couple classes before me. We were from the same town, but he was younger than I was by, I don't know, I think he's 6 or 7 years younger. And we just happened to road trip up and down. So I was leaving at the time from Osceola. I would drive 2 hours up to Ames, Iowa. We'd meet up. He'd drive the other half, the other 2 hours. So I'm driving 4 hours one way to train every weekend, and then 4 hours back home. Sure. And we'd ride halfway and just hit it off. I mean, that dude's over at least once a week still. So wrestling has really also hooked me up with some of the greatest friends I've ever had. So, greatest decision I ever made.
Talk about, you've gone through the training. You're stepping into the ring for the first time for your first match. Talk about what goes through your mind and what that match was like.
So,
and was it against? And it wasn't against Giggles the Clown, was it?
Oh man, I can top that.
Okay, all right, here we go.
So first off, I was ecstatic for my first match. I'm never a guy who got the jitters. Like, I played football in high school because that was kind of the thing a big guy was supposed to do. I liked football, but that wasn't my jam. I did theater and speech and debate, and I was a massive dude for doing theater and speech and debate. But so I love the theatrics of professional wrestling. I don't get nervous in front of the audience. I don't get anxious before a match. Like, I'm just ready to get out there and do my thing from day one. So going into my first match, I had the opportunity to wrestle a gentleman who's a friend who was a manager primarily, but also trained to wrestle, named Flav, the Pimpologist, who wore a crushed velvet pimp costume. And I love him to death. Fantastic guy. If you watch the match, he is a wonderful guy, and he's deceptively athletic, but he is definitely not graceful in his movements. It is a wonderful match. I love it. It's a sight to see. So it's an uncoordinated, gangly pimp and a first-timer, just indecent, escorted to the ring by my beautiful manager, Susie Q. Baba Ganoush, who is also an inflatable doll, because I decided to make a splash in the business coming out the gate. You have to stand out. So I was escorted to the ring by a blow-up doll for about 4 years for the initial portion of my wrestling career.
Well ahead of the promotion in Japan that uses a blow-up doll as one of the wrestlers.
Absolutely. I was well ahead of that.
Yes.
I proposed to her in the ring. In fact, one of my favorite matches was against James Jeffries. And it was the day after I had legitimately proposed to my wife. And I make a comment during the match about proposing to the blow-up doll and how much I cried. And you can hear my wife go, "Bullshit, you didn't cry, and that's me."
That's interesting. You don't come across very many people that inquire a blow-up doll into their into part of their shtick. So how did that idea come about, and how did it go over with everybody?
Random, just completely random. I was an Al Snowmark at one point, and I'm like, sure, I could step that up a little bit. I mean, I wasn't exactly original. I took something and did something else with it. I'm not just incredible. I'm just indecent because I carry a blow-up doll and I'm indecent. Super creative. It was great when I was drunk in my 20s.
hey, he's just indecent. I love it, man.
So it just was a random idea that I just ran with 100%. I mean, I took her job hunting at Subway and Hy-Vee. That got ironically enough, some of the other guys caught heat for that. I was out of town when TS came down on them for that. So I didn't even get in trouble for that. They did. I would drive around, and if you roll your window down about yay far and you have a blow-up doll seat belted in your passenger seat, the arm will wave like this. And when people drive by, initially they'll wave, and then they'll see the obviously shocked expression on your passenger, and they'll ask questions. So, all right. She accompanied me for like 4 years. She would ride shotgun, was always over with the audience. She probably signed more autographs than anybody else on the card. And it was always weird because parents would come up and go, "Hey, can our kid get a picture with the doll?" Do you know what this is? Because I don't want to get in trouble. But if you say it's okay, yes, but I'm not liable.
Right.
Eventually, a couple years in, as happens, eventually the promoter starts to realize maybe we're pushing it. So I went to black athletic tape with the word censored and put it over the mouth because kids kept wondering why she was always so surprised, and the explanations were getting harder and harder.
I could imagine at mostly family-friendly shows. I could imagine those.
Oh, yes. Well, there was one family-friendly show in particular my opponent was in the corner, and I had the brilliant idea that it wasn't me. I want to go on record now as Susie's idea. I merely facilitated Susie's idea to give this guy the Bronco Buster. So I parade her around the ring, maybe flashing a little more of the Bronco than I should have, and do the thing. We go out afterwards, and the promoter comes to the bar, sees the poster on the wall where on the bottom it says family-friendly entertainment, rips that portion off the poster and hands it to me and goes, "Hey, I want you to carry this around with you for the rest of the evening, please, so that next time you can remember not to flash the blow-up dolls nether regions to the children front row."
So, okay, what has happened now to Susie? What was the ultimate nail in the coffin for her being written out of the story, and where is she now?
She decided she got the line. Joined the church. She became a missionary. She's working in Botswana, I believe, last I knew. I wish her well. She's doing great. We're not really in touch anymore, but that one is the story I will tell Max Chill. And if Max Chill would please earmuffs, Max Chill. So we went river tubing one weekend, and I stuck a beer in every orifice of that doll and sent her down the river like a Viking funeral. And I still like to imagine what it might have looked like as she floated down past the Hessen House in Des Moines.
Like a Viking burial. I'm dying, dude. I am dying.
So I found myself at a point where I was getting into tag wrestling, and I was tagging with Ugly. And Ugly had the Ugly stick, and his wife was our manager, and so we had this legitimately attractive woman. He's got this stick. I'm already a ridiculous over-the-top clown. I can own every minute of that. And I'm like, maybe the doll is just a touch too much. Plus, I'd already bought 13 blow-up dolls in 4 years. And the bank starts to ask questions.
Yeah. Write it off for work.
To have a rewards point card at the local adult novelty store because you buy so many inflatable dolls, and they recognize you for it, and they start asking questions. I also had run into, here's a fun fact. You don't get to open them up in the store and blow them up and see if they are the model that you like.
Oh.
They are not universal. Some have bigger endowments than others. And on 2 separate occasions, I bought a doll who was so gifted that the promoter required me to duct tape them down because they were larger than the head of the doll.
Oh my.
And that's where the line was.
Yeah, I could see you opening them and not knowing what you're going to get. So you're just as surprised as everybody else.
Yes, exactly. I always thought it was fun.
It's almost like the company was playing a rib on you.
It was the best version of Christmas every time. I was also shot down when I requested, like, to really upscale the gimmick. Like, I asked to have a fundraising show with all funds going towards me upgrading to a real doll. Nobody else was really behind the idea. But I put it out there.
I've got one question I wanted to go back and ask. I hate backtracking, but I hear you say something and I want to point it out. You talk about tape trading back in the day and all the different type of wrestling you were exposed to with those tape trade. Do you remember guys you were interested or you were like introduced to by those, or any memorable shows or matches you remember seeing from those tape trades?
I always liked a lot of either the strong style stuff or the fun, like gimmicky stuff coming from Japan. It's big into Curry Man, just because.
Yep.
It's fantastic because I came into the business in a weird situation where I was kind of plugged in but not training. I had those three brothers who included me quite a bit. So I actually went on a trip to Illinois before I started training. This probably would have been 05 maybe. To a training camp in Illinois by Christopher Daniels. Now, when we showed up, apparently he was not made aware that it was a deal where there was like a group of guys who hadn't had training and a group of guys who had. So we thought everybody was going to be a little more experienced than they were. So there was some initial miscommunication and frustration, but it was kind of cool to see somebody. That was my first experience of seeing somebody I saw on television or on tape and getting to meet them in person and like have an interaction.
Sure.
So that one always kind of stands out. And then I almost forget because I not to slight them, I kind of forget it. I did train for a few weeks prior to training with TS Aggressor and prior to my deployment because the three brothers own their own ring and were going to train me. And we did for a few weeks, and then I legitimately got a letter in the mail. So I'd been in the Army I did 4 years, got out, and then I received a letter in the mail 2.5 years later saying, surprise, you're coming back. You have 2 weeks, and you're plugged back in, and you're going to deploy to Iraq. So there was a 2.5 year period where I was kind of plugged into wrestling, but didn't get to participate yet. So I was working on rectifying financial and legal misdeeds. And then going and traveling for Uncle Sam. So during that interim, there was a short period where I trained with those guys. And I forgot about that, but that reminds me of a fun story of my actual first time in the ring. Wasn't that match with Flav. That was my first match. My first time in the ring was a battle royal, a ladder royal in Delta, Iowa, which is an event where, much like Money in the Bank, battle royal, someone's hanging over top, but you can be eliminated via pinfall anywhere in the arena at any time. And I was given the opportunity to participate. And as they're introducing everybody, and everybody's entering the ring one at a time, everybody's getting an introduction. I'm staying there jittery as hell. I'm wearing like cut off Army pants because I'm like 1 month out of the Army and that's all I own. And I'm jittery and I'm waiting and I'm like, all of a sudden I realize nobody asked me what my wrestling name is. I don't have one. Holy crap. So I look at my buddy and I go, hey, what's my name? He goes, don't worry about it. I got you covered. You're number 17. That's all you need to know. Okay. Number 16 goes out. I'm ready to go. And then at number 17, it's my cock. Mike Hawk. So for the rest of the night, we go out to eat later. The rest of the night, that's the running gag. Oh man, my cock took a beating. I just choked my cock in the corner all night.
Mike Hawk.
Out there. And the problem with the guys who bring you in the business being three brothers who have known you since you were 12 years old and have treated you like brothers since you were 12 years old is I was kicked in the genitals 13 times during the course of that battle royal by those three individuals. And at every instance, welcome to the business, kid. Miserable.
Oh. On that note, oh man, there are so many stories we could branch off of. Let's pause. We do have to pay some homage to our other shows on the network. And on the other side of the break, we have our weekly moment of focus. So let's take a time out because we'll need that to focus on the next half of the show. Stay with us. We'll be back here in just a moment.
For Frequency's Sake has you covered on all things sports. From the squared circle to the hardwood and the gridiron to the speedway, we've got something for everyone. Walk down the aisle with the boys from Card Subject to Change every Sunday as they take a deep dive into everything pro wrestling. Head on over to the hardwood with Doug Green and Watching the W each week for all the news from the WNBA. Want more insight from Pit Row? Check out the Green, White, and Checkered podcast where they give their insight on everything happening on and off the track. Need your gambling fix? We've got you there. Dan Hancock and Gotham Gambling will help you cover the spread with the Golden Ticket Show. Football more your style? Explore the waters of NFL DFS with DFS Deep Dive with Brian Craighead and Jordan Kernan each week. More into the science portion of the game? The Professor John Bush and Dennis Michelson take you into their science lab and dissect your week in the data lab. Need to know who to start last minute? The network's flagship show, For Fantasy's Sake, is here in a pinch. The fellas come to you live every football Sunday from 10 to 11:30 Central with the week's best DFS, gambling, and lineup advice. And wrap up your Sundays with Joe Winkle and Nick Brinks as they come to you live with educated ignorance, looking at all the day's action. Not enough football on Sunday? Not a problem. Kick your feet up at lunch on Monday and slip into the football lounge with Mark and Dan while they look at the week that was in news, notes, and more. For Frequency's Sake, you know what we mean.
Welcome back to the show.
Welcome back to Card Subject to Change, episode 166, our discussion with Just Indecent. We're going to get back to that momentarily, but CZ, we have to visit JT Energy first, I believe.
We do. We have to get back on track and just take a moment to focus. So here we are with episode 44 of our weekly segment from JT Energy and his moment of focus.
Welcome to a moment of focus with the feline phenom, JT Energy. And this week, the boys at the Card Subject to Change podcast, well, they're interviewing a very decent human being. In some circles, maybe a indecent human being. But regardless, Just Indecent is in the studio. And my friends, what are we focusing on today? What are we going to take our time and think about? Well, we all have a different set of things on our plate every single day. Sometimes it can be overwhelming. But what we need to focus on is tackling those things one by one. Don't forget, even when your plate is overloaded, you can work through each and every one of those things, step by step, day by day. So don't let your life rule you. You rule your life. This, my friends, has been a moment of focus with the feline phenom, JT Energy.
And of course, if you want to watch more of the episodes of the Moment of Focus, you can go back in our archives, watch the episodes on YouTube at CSTC Podcast, or you can catch JT Energy himself on Facebook. Look for JT Energy, or across social platforms at DJ Click and Play, anywhere you want to find him. But we are back here on the Card Subject to Change podcast. I am the Wizard CZ, and I'm joined as always with my partner, Never Wrong, Nick Bull, on the podcast by the fan, for the fan, powered by Lopez Pizza, built by Durham Remodeling, colored by Ryan Allison Tattoo, and protected by Jared Zook of Country Financial. We are sitting down with Just Indecent. We've had a raucous first half of the show. I can't wait to see where we go next. Man, so many things I could ask, so many ways we can go. Justin, let me ask you this. Okay. Are you following current product? And if so, what are you watching?
I got to be honest. I'm a haphazard watcher of current product, mostly because I got a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. I've been very busy lately with mostly animated ponies and dogs. So I catch when I can. I like everything though. That's the beauty of professional wrestling, is the variety. So I can't say when I watch that I lean towards any one thing. Though I must confess, if I do have a minute, I'm probably going to go back into the vault and find something older.
All right.
That's just.
And what's that going to be? What's that going to be?
Yeah.
Ooh, depending on my mood, I like a lot of territory stuff, a lot of old school, early 80s. I like some Mid-South, Georgia, Carolinas, anything from that region is usually fantastic. I can't get enough of 80s WWF. I'm going to watch Macho Man and then jump to something else, come back. I have my preset list of probably 10 matches I'm going to fall back on every time.
What are they? What are your go-tos that you like to go back and watch?
I think
I love hearing what other people are watching because it leads me to possibly watch some of that stuff. So
one of my absolute favorites is there was a European tour, and it was Macho Man HBK with Sherry. And there were 2 matches. One you can find on probably on, I don't know where it's at, Peacock, Netflix. I don't keep track of where it's all. I have a subscription to all of them, so I know I'm going to be able to find it. Right. There was one you can find easily on the network, but there's another one that isn't, that was in Germany, where the story is Macho Man had his match with Flair at WrestleMania, been in the figure 4, knees messed up. So he wants to continue to sell that leg through the European tour. And the story is he took a thumbtack and put it in his boot prior to the match and wore it out there to constantly be a reminder of, hey, this leg's broken. So if you watch the match, you can see that it is the most fantastic use of the working of the limb that every old guy wants to tell you about from 2 guys you wouldn't expect it from. And it's a phenomenal match.
Definitely be on the lookout for that. HBK and Macho Man, 2 matches. You said they fought on a European tour. So this would have been like maybe after WrestleMania 8.
It was right after Flair and Macho Man.
Or was that? Yeah, Flair Macho Man was WrestleMania 8. Was it not CZ?
No. I believe so.
Yep, WrestleMania 8 in Indianapolis. That's how I remember. So, okay. Gives you a time period to go look for them. But, yeah, I just love hearing what other people watch because I do the same thing. I get the 5 or 6 things open, and I hop around. I really can't sit down and watch a whole thing unless it's a whole show. But, yeah, I love hearing what other people have to watch.
But I also will randomly choose hey, I want to watch Clash of Champions, or I want to watch, something of that nature where, maybe not a pay-per-view per se, but pay-per-view before pay-per-view, a closed circuit or something.
Sure.
Something I remember watching from, when I was a kid. Everybody likes that nostalgia. What brought you to it?
I was so upset. So one of my go-tos for a while was watching old school NXT. Old school, it's been around for 12 years now. I was watching from the beginning, and now since they made the jump onto the CW, you cannot find the archived episodes anywhere other than the takeovers, which are still on Peacock. And I was so upset because that was my go-to for a while, just continuing to watch those old shows. But I love going back, and I think right now to kind of pick up where NXT failed me, I'm watching Nitros. And I got to tell you, I've mentioned this to Nick off the air a few times. I I was always a Hulkamaniac growing up. Macho Man was number 2, and the big storyline for me getting into the business was the Mega Powers exploding. But watching some of these Nitros back with Hulk Hogan as the biggest face in the world, and seeing what he does in the ring, I'm like, how are we cheering this guy? He's terrible. He's evil. Sitting there back raking and eye gouging.
Ever number 2.
Oh man.
No, I used to love watching Nitro. So I found that I could record Nitro, and afterwards, it was always followed by movies for guys who like movies.
Okay.
So
Yep.
So it would always be some like cheesy 80s action movie immediately after. So I'd record it on my VHS tape, watch Raw live with my best friend, and then we'd immediately, once Raw was over, watch WCW, and then watch whatever terrible movie followed. We never did anything while in school on Tuesday.
So, talking about flipping back and forth, I was very similar. I wouldn't record Nitro, but I would watch Raw, and then they would always rebroadcast Nitro about an hour or two after the original airing of the show. So I would go back and I'd stay up late watching it that way. Were you more of a WWE guy or a WCW guy, or were you a little bit of both?
You know, it's kind of the same thing as to why I like where the wrestling industry is now. I've never been a brand guy, a company guy. I know who I like to watch, who entertains me, who draws me in. I don't care where they're at. That's where I'm going to watch. And that was the big change in wrestling as a whole. We went from this territory mindset to this brand mindset. And now we kind of exist in this world where, in all reality, fans don't care where you work. They care about the individual wrestler. So wherever you are, they're going to follow you. So I had my favorite people that I liked. I would say I probably leaned more towards DX than NWO.
Mm-hmm.
To be honest, more because I didn't. You had fake tough guy, and then you had drunk frat guy, essentially, and I kind of leaned towards drunk frat guy, I guess.
You know, there was NWO and DX were big for both during the time, and it was just kind of your preference. I mean, I was probably more of a WWF guy, but man, I definitely watched Nitro to watch different guys. I love the mid card and the lucha stuff over on Nitro more so than the main event stuff. So getting to go back and watch Nitro right after Raw here was always a big thing. I thought that was great. We thought we had made then, and now look at all the wrestling we have now.
Oh, it's amazing what there is now. It's amazing the opportunities people have now. I mean, I kind of feel like when I came in, wrestling was in a little bit of a slump, but just about to make that upturn. And I see the opportunities new wrestlers have now coming into the business, and the opportunities with the integration of streaming and the internet, as opposed to, hey, you kind of have to know somebody who knows somebody, plug yourself in, send your physical tapes or CDs to the WWE. You have to, send your 8x10s, and now everything is online. It's easy to be plugged in. It's easy to make connections. There are way more shows, way more companies. The growth of the industry has been fantastic over the last 10, 15 years, and it's been awesome to see that.
For
sure.
You mentioned watching individuals and not so much like brands or companies. Is there anybody that you're watching right now that you think, oh, this guy we need to keep an eye on him. He's going to blow up here real soon?
I would love to answer that, but I'm going to be completely honest. I'm not as plugged in on the current product to be able to answer that question. I could tell you guys locally that I think are that way. I think ZK47 is a kid who's going to do great things. I think Ethan Everhart is a kid who's going to do great things. I think the golden boy, Bryce Jordan's going to be somebody. Jackson King can catch some eyes. Of course, I'm partial. I really like these kids, but there is a lot of amazing up-and-coming local talent that I think is going to explode in the next 3 to 5 years.
And we see a lot of that. We see a lot of that here on this side of the state of Iowa. I know you're kind of centralized. Don't get over to the east side of the state very much, but no, we see a lot of that here. I could name a handful of names that I think are going to blow up here real soon and just be big stars. What advice do you give, being in this business for about 18 years? What advice do you give to the younger talent that are coming into the business and trying to make a name for themselves?
2 things. I would say never get so lost in where you're at that you're not willing to learn a little more. There's always going to be somebody who has something to share. And it might not be who you expect it to be. You could look off into, that's the beauty of indie wrestling. It's like playing, it's like having your Iowa Cubs and your summer softball league all playing the same game. You've got guys at various ambition levels and various points in their career. But nobody can be discounted. Somebody is going to give you a nugget of information that can make a significant change in either how you look at the business, how you do something that makes a change in you, that creates something that catches somebody else's eye. So be willing to listen and learn from anybody. And 2, don't be afraid to really get out there and try something new. That doesn't mean do a new flip. Don't do a new dive. Don't get caught up in this is what I do, so this is what I'm always going to do. But I think to me, the key element for me, both what inspires my love for pro wrestling and what I would hope everybody else would take with them is, at the end of the day, we're a bunch of weirdos in tights if it's not for the fans. Remember the audience. That's what makes us different than every other sport, is we acknowledge the fact that there's an audience and they matter. Make them matter.
That's why I love going to indie shows across the Midwest here, is you're more plugged in with everybody that's working the event, with everybody that's around you. You make new friends, and it's a more intimate feeling than you go to an arena show for, whether it's AEW, WWE, or even like TNA. Sure, they're acknowledging the fans, they're getting you involved in but it's a different feel. Yeah, it's more of a family oriented feel when you're at these indie shows across the U.S.
I'm never a guy who's going to get the opportunity. Well, maybe, who knows? You never know what life throws at you. I'm a guy who can't currently say, like, hey, look at this great resume I have. Here's all the big companies I've worked for. But one thing I can say is I've never failed to make a connection when I've been on a show. And the reason is I never let go of that 10-year-old kid sitting at that table. Remember why you got into this? And inspire that in everybody sitting in the seats, and you'll be somebody to remember.
That's a good way to look at it. That really is a good way to look at it. I mean, I know we were talking, a lot of people were talking after the first Raw on Netflix that took place this past week. And everyone's like, what'd you think? What'd you think? And I'm like, could you imagine being 8 to 12 years old and that was like your first time watching wrestling? I mean, I'm 44 and I thought it was cool. I can't imagine what like an 8 to 12-year-old thought watching this over-the-top, mega, larger-than-life performance.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. It'd be cool to be 8 to 12 again and watching that and what it would be like from that vantage point. I can only imagine.
And I love when you said, keep that 10-year-old self in mind, because part of what draws us to this business, in my opinion, is one, nostalgia, and two, and Nick's having some technical issues, but it's the magic that you feel when you go to these shows. I'll speak for Nick. He was on a podcast a week or two ago with a friend of ours here locally and talked about how he walks into a building and he still gets that glow, seeing the ring, seeing the crowd filling up. He's there with his people. And that's what I love about this business, is you're there connecting with everybody possible.
Absolutely. And there's nothing to be the connection, not only with the wrestlers in the audience and the individuals, but it's amazing how everybody can feed off of each other and feel interconnected, because pro wrestling is a fringe kind of thing. So everybody who's there kind of has that special connection. Like, hey, most of your friends think you're weird too. You probably, it's one of those things where it's that little bit of extra that made us different that we all get to connect on as well. We're not a mainstream kind of people. It's what makes us fringe that helps us connect. It's our geek, and it's fantastic, and I love every bit of it.
Without a doubt. Nick, I was just telling your story from Rob's podcast about the magic you feel when you walk into an arena.
Oh, always, man. I love just the buzz before a show and watching and seeing how everything's set up, the chairs, the staging, whatever, the ring. Yeah, I love that. I love that part of the show, the quiet before the storm. I think it's so cool. And it's what I tell everybody. It's like, man, when you make wrestling friends and you go to shows and you're on chats together and text message groups, and like, I wish more people knew about this or cared about this like we do. This is great. I think so many people are missing out on such a cool thing.
I agree. That's why I'm infectious. I can't not bring it up to everybody at every chance I get.
I know.
Guilty.
Hey, I like wrestling.
Justin, this has been fantastic talking with you here. You've had some great stories, and definitely, I'm sure there are so many more in the bank. We could go on for hours. But I tell everybody, we try and be respectful of everyone's time, yours, mine, and our fans. So we're getting close to that hour mark, but definitely want to have you back on at some point to share more stories.
Absolutely.
I'm off the hook, though. Got to tell us where people can find you coming up and where they can find you on socials.
Well, I'm going to be APW, Waterloo, Iowa, January 25th. I'm on Twitter, Instagram. I'm going to. Here's the problem, gentlemen. I'm 44 years old, and I work with these for a living. I'm not great at my social medias. You can find me on Facebook. Most of you know how to find me better than I can find myself.
Oh, I understand that.
You're very easy to find on Instagram. Just
thank goodness, because that has been one of my great hindrances in this great business is I use technology like a handicapped chimpanzee. I'm just not good at it.
Yeah, I'm the same way, but I see it's pretty easy to find on there. So you'll be at APW coming up.
Yes.
What else? What else is in store? What big plans does Justin Deaton have in wrestling in 2025?
2025, I have ambitious goals. So I got to sit out for quite a little while. I had knee problems, shoulder problems, as happens as you get older. I also had 2 kids, but there's an old saying, beware the old man in a profession where young men die early. And I have a particular resilience and tenacity about me. And I'm really kind of looking forward to coming into 2025 and reminding people why I'm still here and exactly why my resume is what it is. As you get older, you put on a couple pounds. There's some gold-plated girdles that are calling my name. I'd like to return back to some places. I know I've always got a home in IPW, and I'm always in that food chain, and I always know I can find my way back to the top. APW, I've got a date with Aaron Von Barron coming up very, very soon. Madhouse, I love Madhouse. I fit in Madhouse. I embody Madhouse. So I believe this year is going to be a fantastic year for Dad.
Excellent.
Great way to look at it. It's a great way to look at it.
Well, Justin, once again, thank you so much for being a part of the Card Subject to Change. We appreciate you coming on, and you are more than welcome back anytime you want to hop on and just shoot the crap about wrestling with us.
Anytime. I love talking, and if it can be about me, great. But in general, as long as my mouth's moving, I'm on board.
I love it. All right. Well, that is going to put a wrap on this episode of Card Subject to Change, the podcast by the fan, for the fan, powered by Lopez Pizza, built by Durham Remodeling, and again, colored by Rallin Allison Tattoo, and protected by Jared Zook of Country Financial. For my partner, one half of the For Frequency's Sake Tag Team Champions of the World, Never Wrong, Nick Bull, I am the Wizard CZ. We will see you midweek for the kickout, and right back here next Sunday for Card Subject to Change. Thanks for tuning in.
This has been a For Frequency's Sake Podcast Network production. For more great content, subscribe to For Frequency's Sake on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter.